Have you ever wondered what it would be like for you and your family to spend 7 days completely isolated from the outside world? Well, today on Retrospect, we'll meet a family who did just that. Here are Mr. and Mrs. Douglas Brown of Topeka, Kansas, who, with their children, spent a full week in an 8 by 11-foot fallout shelter. Does this young man represent your entire family, Mr. Brown?
No, we have others.
Could we meet them?
Yes. Vicky? And Connie? And Denny? Scott? Larry? Wes? And Deanne.
And another beauty.
And this is Russell.
I was about to say that I thought it was about time we introduced this gentleman. Well, that's a lot of little people, but I must say they're very charming. Tell me just why, Mr. Brown, did you and company decide to spend a week in a fallout shelter?
Well, we're in the business of building fallout shelters, and we wanted to find out what some of the problems were that would arise. And also, we wanted to find out just exactly what our family would need to have in a shelter.
Well, Mrs. Brown, I imagine you had a few problems along the way, for the first time anyway. What was your biggest problem?
The biggest problem was keeping the children from becoming bored and fighting with each other.
How did you handle that?
We had an abundance of games and toys, and we controlled their play. We had talent shows. We had regular times for everything that we did, and we all did it together so that everybody was working with each other.
Did you have any real police work to do along the way during the 7 days with the kids?
Oh, yes. We had to control them very closely. That was the one thing that we found was quite necessary.
Some well-knit and close rules and regulations, I take it.
That's right.
Mrs. Brown, how did you manage to cook for all those youngsters and yourselves?
When the electricity was on, we used an electric hot plate. But when the electricity was off, we used a sterno burner.
Well, just what did you cook?
We had canned foods of all kinds, especially the prepared meals like spaghetti and meatballs, that type of food. But we did find that we should have had more cold meats and cold foods that can be eaten directly from the can rather than having to be heated.
What did the youngsters like, Mrs. Brown?
They took very well to the dried fruits, the raisins, the dried prunes and apricots. We also had some hard candy and some of those miniature chocolate bars, and those went over quite big.
Sounds pretty normal.
Yes.
Outside or inside? Mr. Brown, what did you learn about your own shelter preparedness? Was it adequate?
Yes, we found that we had spent a great deal of time in preparing our shelter, and it was well worth it.
Well, that's very good indeed. Another question for you, Mrs. Brown. What did you find to be the most useful items in your shelter?
The first aid kit came in use within the first 20 minutes of being inside the shelter.
That's par for the course, too.
Right.
What happened? I trust nothing serious.
One of the boys stuck his hand into the blower that brings the fresh air into the shelter and received numerous cuts on his finger, and we had to put the first aid kit into use immediately.
Well, a question for both of you, Mr. and Mrs. Brown. At any time, did you think of giving up?
Yes, we did. About halfway through our stay, we become very depressed. But it was the children's attitude that really changed our ideas for us. And their desires to actually finish the test is what changed our minds.
Well, good for them. And one final question. Do you plan to build a larger shelter for children ranging in age, let's see, from 11 months to 11? Or
7 months
7
to 11
to
years.
11. You're going to build a bigger one?
Yes, we are.
Thank you very much, Mr. and Mrs. Brown. On Retrospect today, it is possible that someday all of us may face the same problems in shelter living. Only it will not be an experiment. It could be a matter of survival. We can all take our cue from the Browns and prepare now, so no matter what happens, our families will...